Welcome to Data Simplified. I'm Monica Felix, and today we're joined by Habiba to talk about responsible AI. Habiba is a computer scientist with extensive training in machine learning and data science. She has worked at CSIRO's Data6 as a research engineer in investigative analytics, and more recently as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. Habiba, welcome to Data Simplified.
Thanks so much, Monica. Thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about, of course, responsible artificial intelligence, maybe one of the most misunderstood tech topics in a few ways. Hollywood has certainly weighed in on the ethics of creating sentient robots and futurist dystopias, but data scientists are interested in nitty-gritty questions like, is an AI model fair or biased, for example? Before we get into that, though, why don't you tell us, why should we care about responsible AI in the first place? Why investigate this question?
Sure. I think we can start to think about it from a more philosophical way that, as any technology advances, over any kind of scientific or industrial revolution that we have been through throughout our life, we always start with this really dizzy, exciting phase where we think, oh, this technology is going to transform the world, and it will solve all our problems. We start with that euphoric sort of a feeling where we are completely drunk in the Kool-Aid and try and think that this tech is all the best of the anything. And then over the time, we realize how it can be misused, how it has its own repercussions. And by the time we realize it, it's usually very late to reverse it. Either we are so addicted to it that we cannot let go of it, or it has already created the kind of havoc that we can just, in retrospect, think about, say that we wish that didn't happen, but that did. So in the same way, AI has been there for a while, and mostly we see it in Hollywood movies. The thing that you talked about, these futuristic robotic environment that will take over all our lives and whatnot. And it sounds scary to begin with. Quite honestly, a lot of it is very unrealistic. Even after so much of advancement, the kind of robots we have actually are so simple that they're almost dumb. So we are not there yet where robots would take over our lives. But of course, the fear or fear, or at least like this phobia or this feeling that this can happen is there. But that's just one way of looking at it. Otherwise, I think what in this whole hype get missed is what actually is in reality the issues that AI can cause. We kind of just think of that futuristic things like, maybe like in 50, 60 years may happen or may not happen. And we are worried about those things, that we're not actually paying attention to things that are happening right now and are affecting our lives every day. And they may not seem like as fancy as somebody taking over the world, but they're small, and they usually the most pernicious part is that they affect the people who are the most marginalized one, and this is something that gets completely lost. So I'll give you one example: facial recognition. We have seen amazing advancement in computer vision, and as a data scientist or a machine learning practitioner, I can go on and talk about I'm fascinated by the tech. I'm fascinated by the topic. I'm fascinated by the kind of models we have and how accurate they are. However, when they get used, where are they getting used? Who are they used for? So there are lots of surveillance applications in government, in other organizations which are using those, and we don't know how they're using or misusing those. First of all, we can forget about we can even separate this part, that whether we can assume that any organization has their best ethics in their heart and mind, they're not going to misuse it. But on the other hand, the most important fundamental question is the basic human right question. Do I want to be surveilled? Do I want my to be recognized have they asked me, is the permission taken from the user? And AI with big data, the problem is you just can't go and ask everyone. And so this information get lost as to what is happening. And there's so many gray areas that we are still trying to figure out what are the right laws, where are the boundaries. So I think that's the main issue with it. Personally, as a practitioner, I find that we look at the bigger picture, but we don't look at what is in practice happening right now and how is it affecting our lives.
Mm-hmm. So if I were to play devil's advocate for a moment and just try to imagine someone who doesn't quite see what is pernicious about this, we see it incorporated in a lot of technology already every day. So with your phone or login screens, I think for some of the operating systems, or maybe even Facebook, you can just turn on your webcam, scans your face, and that's a way of logging in, and it's very hassle-free. What is dangerous about that?
What is dangerous about that is that you don't know that information about you is being saved, where it's being saved. You didn't give that permission. Yes, you just wanted a convenient tool that you could scan your face and log in, don't have to remember your password, and that's it. So you have been sold that convenience, free of cost. But what you don't know is that your information is saved at the back end. There's probably no way you can ask them to erase that information, and where it can be misused. So for example, if you are, let's say in a mall, you open your phone by scanning that, all of a sudden it's recorded where you are, what you're, and based on your location, they can guess where you are. You can be targeted with ads, which usually may not be something that you are very worried about, or even forget about worried about, even annoyed by. Sometimes you do that, why are they, I didn't ask for it, but I'm getting it. But the thing is that the big companies are going to use that data and sell it. So basically, the punchline is that when something is free, then actually you are the one that gets monetized. And the issue with that is you don't know. So yes, we are sold the convenience. And yes, of course, I also wouldn't want to log in again and again. But the thing is that what is lost in all of that is that that what is that information that they are that I'm giving away is being used for. So there is no such thing as free lunch, So somewhere, this is being used. So I don't know if you have heard of the term of surveillance capitalism. It's a great book, actually, and if you get a chance to, please do read it. And it's about these big companies that are, providing you everything for free. So let's say you go to a search engine, you enter a search term, you feel like, wow, you get like just troves of information just for nothing, like, free, it's free. But there's nothing free. It's basically, they are tracking, what your searches are. When you sign up, or, you do this, we actually never even read those copyrights or those corporates in the big, we just accept them, right? They're like pages long. And the thing is, we are actually allowing them to use our data with however they want. So what I find problematic is that when we give this free access to ourselves, our lives, we just don't know how they're going to use it. So this is the problem, and it is being used. So it's not something just being my paranoia. It is something that's very real.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking about, there was something in the news just 2 weeks ago. Clearview AI is one of the major companies for this with facial recognition. They have over 10 billion photos in their database. And it seems like only now are they really being subjected to rigorous scrutiny. And it's a product that is used by law enforcement agencies around the world, apparently. And, just going back to one of the points you were making, it seems like that's kind of what you were touching on as well, is the unknown potential of what is really going to be done with it at that level by the government.
Exactly. And I don't know if you have heard of Deepfake. That is another tool. And then there had been other versions of it, something called, was reading about it, nude fake, which actually now has been taken off. But people, so basically you can create nude pictures of anyone, and it seems so real. So you can imagine how it can be misused. And well, there's no can to it. It actually was being used until so yeah, this is a problem. And then now that's why most of the responsible organizations are really careful with computer vision applications, and try not to build tools that are that are related to facial recognition, because it has and it has this usually targets the more vulnerable people.
So I suppose that brings me to my next question then. Just thinking about these examples, what would you say are core principles that we should adhere to when building or using an AI system?
All right. So the first thing is, what is our question even right? Okay. So, let's say, usually, like, before AI, the way we would we would design our business problems are kind of like very subjective to who is doing it. All right. But when we build these systems, we are trying to generalize a whole mechanism such that it's usable by multiple people. So, we are kind of encoding those questions in a mathematical model. So the first question we want to ask is that whether we are even asking the right question. Is it targeting toward, is asking about something sensitive information? So for example, again, computer vision, what are we doing this facial recognition for? So for example, I was talking to somebody a while ago from one of the education institute here, and they said, oh, we have a lot of CCTV camera footage, so we can track where students are, who is attending classes and so on. And I was like, wait, I mean, that sounds cool that, yeah, you have all that information, and now you can actually do something, you want to do, quote unquote, something smart about it. But, nobody's comfortable being, first of all, recorded and then being analyzed like this. So, this is something, we start. The second question, important thing to consider is, what is the data we are using? How objective or subjective it is? So by objective, I mean that something that just is coming to us in a more unbiased format. So let's say let's say a financial institute, when they are recording, let's say they're recording your transactions. This is objective data. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It's exact numbers that are there using, right? So we don't have to worry about it. But if, for example, you are a insurance company that is approving somebody's loan, that's specific to what information you want to feed into the system. For example, are you using somebody's gender or somebody's zip code or the demographic, what race they belong to? Are you using those parameters to approve a loan application? Then we need to stop and think about it. So that's the second part, the data. And then comes the modeling part. You build a model. Usually these AI models are black boxes for us. And this is their power, that we don't know how they learn a certain behavior. But what we know is that we look at the performance and we say, oh yeah, they're giving us very good results. We don't care how they did that. So, basically how it was made, we don't care about it. But the problem is that now we need to actually look inside that black box and be able to understand what was it paying attention to. So basically, is it really biasing towards, let's say, somebody's age group or somebody's race or some other things? It's just that, so this is the third part where we need to be very, very careful. The problem with ethics is that it's a very, again, philosophically very fluid. It depends on the person. So my ethics would be somewhat or quite different from yours. Maybe not a lot, but it's just that, we all have our own way of looking at it. So a lot of things, like, things that you would find problematic, others might not find. So, this is the problem with ethics, that, we cannot quantize it very exactly, but these but some of the things that we need to be very careful about is data, the question, the data, the model, what the model is, how is it model weighing its choices, etc. Those are the things we can all across different systems can at least like try to measure those things.
So what you're describing, really, it sounds like there are three players involved. And I mean, of course, I specifically asked you about programmers or the architect who's actually responsible for conceptualizing and building the AI system. But, you know, you give the example of loans and how we need to be careful about objective versus subjective information and how it's interpreted, how it's utilized to even possibly disenfranchise different groups of peoples. But if I want to get a loan, I don't have a lot of say over what I choose to reveal to the bank or to the government. So, I mean, you have programmers designing the system, you have legislators or private individuals who, you know, there's this handshake between the developers and who's actually requesting it. And then you have the user. And I guess when I reflect on the examples you're giving, the kids in school, you know, they don't have a lot of say over whether or not they're allowed to be recorded at that point. So it's just a lot to think about. It seems like, how do we create an environment where all three parties can just engage with this ethical question that you're addressing?
Yeah, you hit the right question and the point that the fact that before AI systems, it used to be a person who's making a decision. So if you go for a loan application, first of all, you are sitting face to face to a human being who's taking up your information. That manager in the bank manager is, first of all, you will get, you know, subconsciously some idea, you know, whether, you know, this with their behavior, the body language, what they are, what you think is, you know, they are basing their decision on. But even without that, you can actually go to a court, for example, and challenge that decision, let's say, right? Irrespective of, you know, whether you think the decision would be fair or not. But the thing is, at least like you have some place to go and speak about it. The problem with the AI systems are, again, a black box, a very generic system, you know, that made the decision. If you go to, let's say, a bank manager and say that, you know, hey, I don't think this was a fair decision, they were like, you know, oh, this was a system, I didn't do anything about it. Like, I mean, they would just, you know, wash their hands off the whole thing. And who's going to question the system? The problem is, you said that this is a handshake between a developer, an organization, and the user. The person who's most affected is the user, who is actually who's first of all affected by the decision, but then they can't do much about the decision because they don't know how that decision was made. And those the other two, it gets so complicated between the developer, the company. Usually, like, you know, a bank is not going to be building these things in-house. Usually, like, they would hire a software company who is an expert in doing this thing and would ask them to build them. They will have a contract, they would build the system, would have all the right testing happening and whatnot. And once it's handed over, the software company is no more liable for it. Like, I mean, I'm sure like they will have this contract that, you know, we're not actually liable. If you want things to change, you have to do it all over again, which will be costly. So it gets so complicated that nobody knows who is responsible and who should be held responsible for it. So, yeah, it gets really tricky with these with the AI systems, unlike before, where you at least thought that you could figure out where the bias is coming from. Now you don't even know. It's just so much like inbuilt in that black box that, yeah, you don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, when we think of things like AI, computer software, I would just say that the social tendency is to view it as this objective, logical process. I mean, that's what we've been conditioned to do. And that's why your work is so important, to kind of raise the veil on that, so we can understand that there's something else going on, and that people were involved in creating that process in the first place, that they entered the data, they curated the data, they developed a series of principles that are being used to manipulate the data. And so you've already kind of alluded to this already. You said that we're seeing growing research pointing to bias within AI models. Do you have any other examples you'd like to point to? I know in the beginning you mentioned that it is affecting minority communities, underrepresented communities. Any others that you can think of?
Yeah, totally. And just before even I give you an example, I think, I would like to add something to the point you raised about the fact that, yeah, we think that, when we think about these systems, we think they are objective or they are very mathematical and so on. So here's the problem. We think of it as a mathematical problem. And we say that, oh, it's a mathematical problem. So math couldn't be, there's no, there's no fuzziness to it. It's gonna give you the right answer, right? If you it's just calculations. But the thing is, an AI model is not just an algorithm or a mathematical equation. It's basically data and a method. So the model is actually a mix of these things. So basically, your data is influencing. So for example, again, computer vision, I give you an algorithm of how you can do, let's say, object recognition. That's a completely independent piece of material. But when you put in your data, you build a model out of it. So based on what data you are feeding it, it will build the kind of model. So for example, if you're sampling, let's say, Asian population only, and your model will be trained, same algorithm will be trained on just the Asian population. If you are looking at the Caribbean population, your model will be trained accordingly. So same algorithm, but based on what data you're feeding, it's going to be different. So that's where things get lost. We think of it as, like all one thing, but they're not. They're two separate. They're separate to each other, right? So I mean, not a real exact comparison, but think about it that, if you think about guns, gun in of itself is an inanimate object. Whoever designs it would think of it that, like, wow, this is a great work of technique that they built. How it's getting used is not something, is either, first of all, in their hands, but, when we think of guns, we think of them as dangerous because of how they are used, not because of, the tech. The tech in of itself is not a problem. It's just how it's used. Same as the math is not a problem at all, but how it gets used or operationalized is where the problem lies. On that, I would actually also suggest another book, Weapons of Math Destruction, that came about many years ago. I don't know if you probably might have even heard of it, but it goes through like a whole bunch of examples of, how big data and AI has been misused. Anyways, yeah, long answer, but now coming back to example. So for example, recently there was this, I came across this study about how in social media, advertisers are allowed to, in some social media, and I'll just name it, Facebook, for example, is the one that was letting advertiser show selective ads to African American population in certain geographic regions, so that they don't see ads of the location of the places, etc. Similarly, on Facebook, again, the way you are targeted by what material you are are shown, what articles you're shown, and I think this is a huge news for news, that how it gets selective. You don't have a choice. You are you're giving selective information, and that's kind of a misinformation that you're given. You don't see the big picture. So yeah, those are some of other examples where, again, you think of it, Facebook, it's free, right? But how it's influencing everything in your life, you don't even have a control on it.
But after talking to you today, I don't think I'll take anything for free anymore. This is very anti-free. But it's true. I mean, that's how they draw you in, though. It seems like a convenience. It seems like a wonderful thing. And you have some very striking examples there. I can see the danger of it, but it seems like AI is also a tool with great potential. And I mean, as a practitioner, I'm sure you see the potential as well. So I guess, in the last few minutes, if we think of something positive in the future, then, what are some toolkits or open source initiatives that are available that can be used to work with AI responsibly?
Absolutely. So I'll give you two open source tool. One is Interpret ML. That's for model explainability. So basically, when you build a model, the first question is can you interpret it? So for example, one of the very simple thing you want to know is what is your model weighting itself on? So for example, is it paying too much attention of your age or your gender, etc.? Is it etc.? So you can do simply like with a tool like Interpret ML, you could do you can check for those things. You can do a lot more, but that's one example. Then Fair Learn is another tool which helps you mitigate bias. So what you can do is that, when you're building a system responsibly, you can think about, okay, these are my sensitive features. I don't want these to be, my model to be highly influenced by it. Let's say gender. I don't want to make a choice between, giving somebody a job based on their gender. So I'm going to flag it as my sensitive feature. And I want to see that the data I'm feeding to a model, to an algorithm, and what's it coming out? Is it really like differentiating between that sensitive feature or not? So this is basically mitigating those biases. So first is interpretation. What is it doing? Second is helping you control for certain features or certain signals that you would think are important to take care of. So yeah, and also data anonymization. So there are differential privacy principles that you need to follow, so that even when you are training your model, we can think of like, oh wow, we have lots of data, but the thing is, like, there's lots of data there is, but we have to deal with data in a way sensitive way, just like the way we would do for money. We're not just going to give it away anywhere. We keep it protected. Similarly, my license number, a lot of other features about me are very sensitive. So you don't want to use even build systems openly on those things. So which are the features that you want to keep private or encrypted, etc. So this is important. Yeah.
Great. And so those recommendations are mainly for anyone who's building an AI system. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are for those that are building. Of course, the organized. So then comes the role of the organization who's building it, how responsibly they should be very open and upfront about it. What I have seen, the challenge is that with these organization, even when they are doing it, they don't want to advertise it, because then you are actually opening up a whole can of worms. If you let again, if you're an insurance company and you say, oh, you know what, we are very careful about this thing. As an end user, you said that we usually are very comfortable with like giving all the information we have about ourselves, like because we have some interest at the end. We want that loan to be approved, so we don't really are thinking too hard about whether we have a right not to share that information or not, or because we think that if you don't, we'll probably get rejected, etc. So the problem with the organizations are that if they are very open and upfront, then people get like more sensitive about it. So they try to, like, even if those who are doing it, they just don't want to talk about it as openly, because that opens up a whole bunch of questions. So that becomes a problem. But of course, on the way other extreme, there should be more measures for users to go back and question the decisions that are being made. So what I loved about the European law, the GDPR that came about back in 2018, that every individual can go and ask for their records to be erased, and it was taken super seriously. I was in Germany, in Hamburg, and working for a retail organization as a data scientist. And we literally, like, for 6 months, the work we stopped building things, but we were trying to put those scripts in place so that we can make sure that none of the user information gets misused, etc. So I think lots of things to be done on too many fronts. But I think the starting point is we need to be aware that there are issues, and we shouldn't take AI. Usually, like, the AI camps are in these two sides. Either you are completely for it, or you are completely against it because it's going to take over your life. So we miss, like, the actual things. Practical things are happening somewhere in between, and we need to think about those ones.
Well, it sounds like I'm hoping conversations like this are helpful, even for people who are not steeped in the technology. They're not programmers, but it sounds like even just to empower the everyday user, just knowing that it's a black box, it's not an objective assessment of who you are as a person, and that eventually maybe you can contest some of these decisions that are being made by AI systems if we all just learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, totally.